This is a podcast by the News Minute, and you are listening to South Central.
Hello and welcome to South Central, a TNM podcast where we put the South at the center. I am Dhanya Rajendran, your host, and joining me in the studio is the anchor of Let Me Explain and the reporting head of the News Minute, Pooja Prasanna.
Hi, Dhanya.
Pooja, your designation, reporting head, was used to troll you by the head of ANI.
By the illustrious journalist Smita Prakash, who is a beacon of hope in journalism.
Yes, so that's a reporting head of the News Minute. So this week, we'll bring you a power pack show. We will look at the Cockroach Janata Party protests, what the violence the police unleashed, the backlash on the media, who people label as the Godi media, and of course, where this entire NEET protest originated from. That's the state of Tamil Nadu, where people have been asking not just about question papers, but that NEET itself should be banned. So we'll have 3 journalists joining us during the discussion. And I don't think this is a week where I must tell you, take a subscription. I think what spanned out in this country is a good example of why you all must support independent media, whichever one that is. The mainstream media in this country, and I'm talking only about TV channels, Hindi and English, are a big disappointment. That's a very minor phrase to use for them, but that's what it is.
They're a disgrace. They're disgusting. They have no conscience. I will be talking more about it despite Dhanya's.
Okay, Pooja, as you all know, is a harsh one of the lot here. But yes, this is a good example for you as to why you should support independent media. See, the number of journalists from small outlets who are there reporting the news, they all are running on funds given by people like you. For us here at the News Minute and News Laundry, it would matter a lot if you can take a subscription or contribute to South Central. We'll go to the headlines, Pooja.
We're shooting this on 23rd July, Thursday morning, and this is the latest that's come in. Prime Minister Modi announces fast-track courts for paper leak cases, but he has been silent on student protests. He's announced that setting up the fast-track courts for paper leak cases, saying the move is aimed at ensuring swift justice and protecting the future of students amid continuing protests across the country.
So one thing is clear, Pradhan's resignation is not in the cards. The BJP is not even thinking about it. The Prime Minister himself is saying only fast-track courts.
Do they not realize the irony when they talk about the welfare of youth and they're not even talking to the students who are protesting? Let's move to Kerala. BJP felt FOMO is what social media told me. So they started their own protest in Kerala. BJP protest march to Kerala Pradesh Congress Committee headquarters in Thiruvananthapuram turns tense. The march was organized in protest against the Congress demonstration held outside the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's official residence in Delhi.
Also, 8 BJP Yuva Morcha workers, we counted 8 of them, marched to actor Tovino Thomas's house saying that, Tovino, why did you support the CJP protest?
I'm very certain they're fans of Tovino. They just wanted to see him.
So in one comment, the picture we have put has only, I think, 5 or 6 of them. So somebody asked, where are the other 2? I think they were taking the picture. Okay, next.
Kerala Chief Minister says former CPIM-led LDF government had agreed to appoint non-Muslim members on the Waqf board. VD Satishan, that's the Chief Minister, alleges that the opposition leader Pinarayi Vijayan is trying to foment communal sentiments against the Congress-led UDF government. Moving on to Karnataka, over 47 lakh Karnataka voters flagged for possible deletion during electoral roll revision so far. So far is the key term here. The cases will undergo further verification by booth-level agents appointed by recognized political parties, and each case will be scrutinized by electoral registration officers before any decision on deletion is taken. We've done multiple ground reports in Bengaluru, particularly about the kind of chaos we are seeing, how BLOs themselves are really struggling to wrap their heads around this very unnecessarily complicated process. Do go watch those videos. Let's move on to Dharmasthala. This is something that literally every single day we both asked about by the Bhakts. But here's an update. Dharmasthala deaths. Courts told several bodies were disposed of in violation of procedure. Saujanya's mother, Kusumavati, had filed a PIL in Karnataka High Court seeking various directions regarding the investigation of 74 unnatural deaths in Dharmasthala.
So the SIT has investigated this. This is apart from Chinnaya's claims. And SIT has submitted a report to the government that's kept a secret till now. But if the court asks for this report, the SIT will have to give it and then it will be public.
Yeah. Let's look at headlines from Tamil Nadu. Chief Minister Vijay says NEET must be scrapped, condemns Rahul Gandhi's detention in New Delhi. Vijay termed the detention of opposition leaders in Delhi as anti-democratic. Meanwhile, leader of opposition Udaynidhi Stalin criticized the police action against rapper Arivu for saying that voices raised against NEET deserve to be heard, not silenced.
So Ariva was protesting in front of the secretariat. He was detained by the police, but then Adhav Arjuna, a minister, called him inside. They had a talk and then Ariva left.
Yeah. Tamil Nadu school breakfast scheme renamed after Congress icon Kamaraj. The breakfast scheme was launched by the DMK government in September 2022 for students of classes 1 to 5 in 1,545 government primary schools, benefiting about 1.14 lakh students in the first phase. For those who are not familiar, Kamarajar was the pioneer of the midday meal scheme. He started, I think, 1954.
Yeah, but how
64.
silly to come and rename stuff. I don't understand.
Yeah,
Anyways.
but everybody wants to take credit for everything. Moving on to Andhra, tension escalate in Vijayawada as BJP activists march to Congress office over NEET protests.
Okay. No need to read. Rest. You turned?
U-turn in Mumbai actress case, how Andhra Pradesh police ended up prosecuting itself with its own charge sheet. Very interesting case this is. The latest charge sheet filed by police in a case where 5 police officers, 3 of them from the IPS, were placed under suspension by the Naidu government, has effectively nullified the narrative built against the officers.
So there's a Mumbai-based actress. Her name is Kadambari. I don't know which movie she's acted in, but she was arrested in Feb 2024 after a YSR Congress functionary said that she was blackmailing. Anyway, now it seems like she was not the victim because the police had initially painted her the victim, but it seems like she wasn't.
Headlines from Telangana, BLOs should not insist on hard copies if enumeration forms were submitted online, says Telangana CEO. BLOs should also not insist on Aadhaar cards for submissions of the forms, says Telangana Chief Electoral Officer.
I haven't submitted mine, have you?
No, but I'm looking to fill. But I'm just saying, just look at how confusing it is. Every day they come up with a new list of guidelines and rules. My God.
But Telangana CEO, I think, has been saying things on record and clarifying things much more than a lot of other people.
But I agree. But, every day when there's new stuff, how do you keep track, right? Clash erupts between BJP and Congress workers in Hyderabad. Telangana BJP chief Ramchandra Rao detained.
No, we're just laughing because every state the headline is the same. BJP is marching to the Congress's offices because the BJP does not like the fact that the Congress marched to the Prime Minister's office. And then there are...
I want to look at this in a little more detail going forward now in the discussion. But you know what I love the most about these protests? Last 12 years, the BJP ecosystem built Modi up into this person who can't be questioned, who can't be mocked, who can't be criticized. And look at how, the youngsters are just like every day mocking him.
Yeah. Okay, so now we move on to our first and the only discussion of the day, but we will bring in a lot of angles as we discuss. This is about the Cockroach Janata Party protests, and on the 20th of July, we saw the police, the Rapid Action Force, the Delhi Police Special Cell unleash violence on protesters, which has, I think, injected new life into the protest. We are seeing more and more people streaming into Jantar Mantar, and the protests have also spread to other parts of India. I read an article in the Scroll today about how people are being summoned by the Mumbai police. Police are turning up at people's houses. So protests are spreading to other parts of the country. And joining us are 2 journalists from New Delhi who have been covering the protests from Jantar Mantar. Smita Sharma, her videos on YouTube, Instagram, etc. are doing really well. Smita, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Hi.
And Nikita Saxena. Nikita also has been covering the protests and is a keen observer about the media's behavior too. Nikita, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dhanya. Nice to be back.
And joining us from Chennai, of course, with what Gen Z call it FOMO of not being at Jantar Mantar, is Kavita Muralidharan, who will also tell us more about Tamil Nadu's demand for a NEET ban. Welcome, Kavita.
Hi. Glad to be here again.
Dhanya, I think the FOMO is way more in our generation than the Gen Zs.
Is it though? I don't know.
Yeah, of course. I think a lot of people are coming for the protest because they're just seeing this online. They want to be part of something. So they're going wherever the protests are. I'll start with you, Smita. You have covered so many protests in Delhi, from the large protests like the Nirbhaya, after the Nirbhaya rape. We have covered the Ramleela Maidan protests in 2011. How do you look at the Cockroach Janata Party protest? And it's been a few days now, right? First, they sat peacefully for many days. Then the Monday incident happened. And we have seen what's been panning out after that.
I think, India is no stranger to protests and andolans. And many of them, of course, have been happening beyond the national capital region. The ones in the national capital region still get highlighted. There are so many of them that have been happening beyond Delhi. In the Ken Betwa project of river linking protests, for instance. It's not something that has happened overnight. That's something very new. But what has changed for sure is the government behavior and the government approach. And the protests in the past 14 years, or since 2014, they're very different in the sense that this deeper sense of perhaps fear amongst people, anxiety amongst people when they step out to protest in the first place, which we have seen play out in the last couple of protests in Delhi, whether it was linked to air pollution, whether it was linked to the issue of the, the culling of dogs. All of these issues, the kind of people that were turning out were far fewer in numbers, and whatever numbers were actually turning out in India Gate, they were being met by, police forces and being dispersed off. I think what this protest has done is that I do feel like people are losing that fear. And what happened on 20th July, the precursor to that was the forcible removal of Sonam Wangchuk from the stage, where he was lifted up. I mean, literally those visuals looked like he was being abducted, wrapped in that white blanket sheet and shifted off to a hospital, citing a court ruling which had actually talked about monitoring of his health, not necessarily abducting him and removing him forcibly and making him break his hunger strike by use of force. So that kind of backfired. And when people came in and poured in on Monday, a lot of comparisons constantly being drawn to the Anna Andolan. And you rightly mentioned, I was with Network 18 then. And for 13 days, I used to be in Ramlila Maidan from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. covering those protests. Of course, on hindsight, we are all wiser today to see that protest as something which wasn't so organic as we all made it out to be at that point in time. And that was a story that was playing out on mainstream television media 24/7. There were multi-camera production setups that had happened. A lot of the crowds were actually coming in because it was a story. Every time they would switch on the television channels, use their remotes, they didn't have to make an informed, conscious decision of switching to a particular channel to look at that story. It was just everywhere on their television screens every time they would switch it on. That's a huge difference in this protest, where the mainstream media was absolutely non-existent in these protests for the first 20-25 days of a very peaceful protest. They only came in when things started taking a turn for the worse, or, they started getting violent. As I said, I think after a long time, we are seeing a protest in India where the central and the key issue is education, really. It's not a specific caste, not a specific community, religion-related issue, but it's education. And I have been covering a lot of these education, youth-related protests, since before the pandemic. That's when we saw the number of paper leaks happening when it came to SSCs, CGLs, particularly the examination, which affects millions of students in Uttar Pradesh, in Bihar, the students from very poor, low-income families that are looking for a secure government jobs because of the sheer lack of employment opportunities in the private sectors. So this is really a youth presence that we saw. And finally, on the day that the protests happened and this lathi charge happened, it was the Kashmirization, as we say, of New Delhi that seemed to be happening. Of course, the Delhi police still continues to categorically deny that any pellets were used on protesters. But we have reports, documented reports of at least 2 people whose reports do suggest that they were hit by pellets. Now, Delhi police may be arguing about a technicality, but if it's the RAF also, which has, in fact, pellets as a part of its RAF gear, which did fire, including that journalist from Outlook who reportedly was also hit by pellets. So despite that brutal force, what we saw play out across the streets of Delhi, every time there would be a tear gas shelling, every time there would be a baton charging, the students would step back and come back again with much increased force. So my heart was literally pounding because I didn't want any firing to take place. That was the only sort of distinction and red line that sort of differentiated what was playing out between what had played out in Kathmandu or in Dhaka, for instance, when it became absolutely violent and there was arson.
Nikita, I want to know from you, what did you see on the ground? Because on video, it looked like, the Delhi police almost were gleeful in attacking the protesters. Some people are defending it, saying that, they were being provoked because some students were teasing them in good humor. But did you see that kind of thuggish behavior where they didn't have to use force, but just because they could, they were going and, kind of using the bait-ins?
Yeah, so I was there at the march to the parliament on 20th, which is where much of the violence unfolded by around noon. And the area that I was at with a bunch of other reporters was near the India Youth Congress office, which is just a short while away, actually, from the press club, just a couple of 100 meters at most. The lathi charge did not take place there while I was there. But what did happen is that there was a lot of jostling, there was a lot of sloganeering. And in fact, up until then, I would say that a lot of the sloganeering was not directed towards Modi. I think that actually changed post the violence. At that point, a lot of the slogans were Vande Mataram, Inqilab Zindabad, Bharat Mata Ki Jai. What I was there for is that very, very suddenly, and it seemed to us without any clear provocation. So, of course, the protesters were jostling against the barricade. The police officials and RAF officials were behind the barricade and some of them were in front. And so there was some amount of, okay, we're trying to get past the barricade and it's not happening. But nothing seemed overtly violent. Nothing seemed overtly confrontational. At some point, in fact, they broke out into the national anthem. And they let off tear gas very suddenly. So in that case, it became quite clear that there isn't any apparent sort of provocation for this. A bunch of folks, including us, then ran into the compound that was adjacent to this road, which is the India Youth Congress office. And what it seemed then was that they also threw two tear gas shells at least, so fired two tear gas shells inside the compound. And so suddenly people were thinking that they're going to seek shelter. And then you were, in this other place, suddenly there's tear gas firing there as well. And of course, your eyes are stinging, your throat is seared, etc. And so people started running across the compound. What I did see, so that's just on what I witnessed. I spoke to about at least, more than 24 people since. And what a lot of people were saying is that, someone told me, ऐसा नहीं है कि इन्होंने हल्के हाथ से मारा है. It's not like they have used a light hand when they were hitting us with their lathis. You were seeing bruises all around. Some people were talking about old men and women who had been hit. So I don't know whether the police derived glee to answer your question, Pooja, because I didn't see firsthand what happened. But of course, you can see the videos and we can hear the testimonies of people who were talking to us. A lot of women reported that they were beaten up by male officers. Some women told me that they were abused when they were beaten up by male police officers. What we did also see, and has been reported widely, is that many police officials were not wearing labels and any name tags. What this means is that if I'm getting beaten up, and none of the rapid action force officials that I saw were wearing tags, some police officials were, a majority that I saw weren't. I spoke to about a dozen at that time. Their answers varied from, आज पहनने का मन नहीं था, इतनी भीड़ में, meaning I didn't feel like wearing this badge, इतनी भीड़ में badge गिर जाएगा. If because we are in such a crowd, our badge might fall. We wanted to safeguard it. Another told me that, if we are in this crowd, the badge might break and then the safety pin could prick our chest. So we took it off. Another told me, it's in my pocket. I don't feel like wearing it. Only one cop who I met while I was walking to Jantar Masjid later that night said that if we wear the name tag, then the focus will be on the name only. And that, I think, is the most honest response I got. So whether or not there was glee, there was a lot of ferocity in the way that they dealt with the students. We have, as Smita pointed out, seen reports of pellet injuries. We have seen videos of the force with which they were hitting the protesters. We are hearing testimonies of them speaking very harshly with the protesters. One protest also alleged that after people were hit, they were not agreeing to help them, to take them to an ambulance or to take them for medical help until they insisted enforcement force that is very clearly certain steps to not be identified, and one can only assume that this is because they want to evade accountability.
Smita, something that Nikita said, and of course what you said also. See, for me, the takeaway from the protests is that in the last 12 years, we have seen fear in the minds of many people, including journalists. People are scared to tell us what's happening. For example, even if there are whistleblowers within government offices, they don't want any detail out these days. The last 12 years has been very, very difficult for us, even as reporters, because of the fear. People just don't want to talk against the Modi government, whether it's journalists, whether it's bureaucrats, whether it's anybody, right?
His own MLAs and ministers.
Even the opposition is scared. But I feel what has shifted dramatically only in the last 4 or 5 days following this police action is that fear is gone. Now, I live in the southern part of India where I think that fear anyway was not as prevalent as it would have been as it was in the north. Here, people were critical of the BJP government, even of Narendra Modi. They would say things in events. But I see a clear shift, right, on social media, even at the protest side. People are using even abusive language. Now, whether we support it or not is not the question here. It's the fact that the fear is gone. That's the first thing. And the second thing I feel, Smita, is that, if the BJP government excelled at creating narratives with their own IT cell and the mainstream TV channels, they are being pushed back with much more vigor. Today, if the BJP and their mainstream media spins one narrative, there are 500 people pushing back. Whether those people are right or wrong is again not the question here. But the point is they are pushing back. I think these are the two big changes, and that change is here to stay, no matter if this protest is successful or not, whether Pradhan resigns or not, etc.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, and it's not just the going away of fear. I think it's also kind of the cult worshipping that had come in here for Mr. Modi and for the BJP. What we in Hindi we say ki andhbhakti. Somewhere that is also changing now. And, just adding to what Kavita was talking, because I was there on the backside of the stage. So when you enter from Jantar Mantar, the entry is through this roundabout, which is between Ashoka Road and Jantar Mantar, and you cross like 3 security barriers, and then you go to the main protest area. So the backside of the stage is where we were that day. And it's around 11:30 when Chandrasekhar Azad and Mahua Moitra left the stage. Now, right at the start of the roundabout, which is where you have to go if you're going towards Parliament, and it's barely 400-500 meters away from the Parliament gate, the size of the barricades were like very huge. And I can give it to you in writing that whether the CJP had asked the students to march or to stop their march, the youngsters had come very deliberate and decided that they would march to Parliament. They were completely sort of impatient to start the march. And the moment Chandrasekhar Azad and Mahua Moitra came and they walked to the barricade, that's when the entire push happened. And I was caught literally in a stampede situation myself because I was reporting and, I was walking right behind that entire crowd. And that's when the first lathi charge happened. And the entire wave of people came running towards me as I was shooting. We were pushed towards a wall. From there on, things started spiraling. And, when you ask that question about the policemen, I mean, particularly on the Connaught Place Road, which is Janpath and Connaught Place, which is full of eateries, it's a favorite place for tourists. That's where we saw the maximum kind of shelling happening because several metro stations had been shut. People were feeling stuck. Obviously, you couldn't book a cab because internet shutdown had happened. People didn't know where to go from. All of that spiraled into this anger where, it wasn't really just the slogans about education anymore. The kind of youngsters that I spoke to, all those reports are there on my YouTube channel. I have not come across such defiant slogans and defiant tones in the past 12 years on the streets of northern India for sure. It's been very, very sort of subservient or cult worshipping kind of a tone that you come across when people talk about this government. But that shift did happen where they started not just questioning Mr. Modi, but abusing Mr. Modi on the streets. And even talking about how elections were being stolen, because when I would ask them that, you're criticizing the government, but the government continues to win elections. And all of these youngsters would turn around and say, हमें तो नहीं लगता कि हम में से किसी ने भी वोट दिया है, सरकार चोरी करके वोट जीत रही है. So to see that shift happen from just the education and NEET paper leaks to start talking about unemployment, to start talking about कि ये चाहते हैं कि बच्चे अनपढ़ रहे so that they are not sharp enough to criticize and question the government. ये चाहते हैं कि हम WhatsApp ज्ञान पर ही हम बैठे रहे. These kind of things, I think, was the clear shift that somewhere a ground has moved. And even in terms of the opposition, I mean, to give credit where it's due, I think the Congress has definitely upped its social media game, especially since the last general elections. And which is why, because the opposition is doing it, you also see so much of creativity and memes out there. There are some really fine, hilarious protest memes happening also, which is quite something that I enjoy scrolling through while I'm doom scrolling about what's going to happen next. So I think really it's the opposition also realizing that at the end of the day, there is a large-scale disappointment that the opposition has not been able to get its act right, that it's not been able to step up to present an alternate blueprint and a vision to the people and not fighting enough on the streets. So the momentum in the protests, the NSUI Youth Congress, they've clearly been out there on the streets taking a lot of, lathis and batons that mainstream media again has not been covering, or not even so much in the independent media space as well. They have been out there on the streets protesting every day. Rahul Gandhi taking the fight directly to the Prime Minister's residence. It was unprecedented. I mean, for 1 hour, the Congress lawmakers sitting there on 7 Lok Kalyan Marg, the back gate of the Prime Minister's residence. I mean, it's a very different time. I remember 2003 December. God, I feel like a dinosaur. But, I was with the public broadcaster Doordarshan then, and this was perhaps one of the last Cabinet Committee on Security meetings that was happening. Because in January, Mr. Vajpayee decided to bring forward the elections by 3 months in 2004, which the UPA then won because BJP miscalculated. They were very confident about the India Shining campaign under Mr. Advani. And in that December night, those days we used to actually be seated barely 200 meters away from the Prime Minister's residence porch. It's eventually that the walls started building up. Then we used to take the comments. Anya was there reporting in Delhi those days, where we would take the comments the moment the leaders would step out of the Prime Minister's residence on the very side of the road. By the time Mr. Modi came in, Mr. Barack Obama came in, I remember reporting actually from the stable and the polo ground that is on the other side of the road. Ghode ke tabele se, like we were literally standing and reporting on Mr. Obama's visit. And now nobody can stand there. So to actually take this fight to the back gate of the Prime Minister's residence, to sit there for 1 hour, I mean, you can debate about it's a sensitive zone, but it shows that the opposition has also realized that you have to break the limits, find new ways of challenging the intimidation in different ways. Otherwise, people will somehow remain sort of subdued and under that huge pressure of fear, which I think is slipping, and that's a huge shift that we see coming out of this protest.
Just 2 points, Tanya. One, that's so symbolic of what has happened, right? The fact that you could take the fight all the way to the Prime Minister's house. Stand-up comedians have joked about how even people older to Modi used to call him Modi ji, because they didn't want to go to jail and stuff like that. And today you have that barrier broken down, literally and symbolically. That aura that they created with so much difficulty, where you can't question him, where even people who want to oppose him are thinking 10 times, can I use this language? Or can I call him a liar, for example? Or should I just say what he's saying is not true? Things like that. And this generation has just completely dismantled 12 years of that aura that has been built. Second point, I just slightly disagree with you on the point where you said the Congress could not take the fight as much, because I think there is a baggage when an opposition political party takes up an issue. There's always a baggage as opposed to what seems like an organic, non-political. I disagree with apolitical, non-political, all of it. But I think more people will respond more strongly, more passionately when it doesn't come from a political party.
I want to bring in Kavita for a minute here. Kavita, you are just watching this from Chennai, right? The whole thing unfolding. Yeah. But, for me, what is surprising is the government's reaction. Now, what Nikita and Smita have explained here, despite all this, the government does not seem to want to do anything or not listen at all. Now, I want to go back to both of them as to what they think is going to happen in the long run. But Kavita, how do you see this protest, which is happening in Delhi?
I mean, I'm completely not surprised, because I've never believed that BJP government will kind of take any action. BJP, I don't think it believes in the idea of dissent at all. any form of dissent, internal dissent, external dissent. I don't, as a party, BJP doesn't believe in dissent. And dissent is very essential to democracy. I don't think BJP believes in the idea of democracy also. So I'm completely not surprised by BJP government's reaction, but the protest is something, protest is, I mean, as Smita and Nikita explained, I mean, this is unprecedented for North India, certainly not for South, certainly not for Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu is like land of protest, but it's, and for me from here, when I've seen people at Balanillam yesterday where CJP supporters in Tamil Nadu, in Chennai are protesting at CPI headquarters, Balanillam. And one of them commented, "We told you so." Like, we told you in 2017 that NEET is problematic and it's happening. Now you realize, now there's much more to realize, because basically Jantar Mantar protest is about the irregularities in NEET, not NEET itself. Whereas a protest happening at Balanillam by the CJP supporters in Chennai, they also demand that NEET be entirely scrapped. It's not just about, they say NEET is, it's not equal. It has structural inequalities and it should go away. That is what's happening in Tamil Nadu. So I think that is the basic difference between what is happening here and what's happening in the north. But I think it's a very wholesome thing to see youngsters in North India coming out and protesting at this great level, showing this kind of dissent. And it's an amazing thing to see.
And also, how much fun we made of Gen Z people in a previous episode, Pooja, where we said that these people are just keyboard warriors. I mean, we have been proved wrong. Pooja especially.
And we're happy to have been proven wrong in this case.
Yeah, actually, that's true.
I think Gen Zs do tend to oscillate in very extreme fashions. I mean, you have our Gen Z colleagues who will refuse to work beyond 6 hours and be very sure to tell you about their work-life balance. But you also have that young Gen Z protester who's standing right in front of the truck while the reel is being made, of the police vehicle, and almost makes it seem like she's pushing it back single-handedly. So giving that very Tiananmen Square kind of a vibe in a possible sort of a suggestion. I just wanted to just add to the previous answers and two things that I missed out. In terms of the police action on Janpath, there were n number of women who came to us and who said that these were male policemen who were coming and hitting them. There was a young girl of 18, there was a woman in her 50s, there was a burqa-clad woman, that the policemen came out of nowhere. They just hit them while they were standing on the corner of the street. And most importantly, they actually abused them with horrible cuss words. Words that I know people in Northern India are very used to, the mother-sister sort of abuses, but these are absolute horrible abuses, and I'm not even used to saying cuss words. So, it just showed that how sort of aggressive the forces were and hitting out at people even when there was no provocation. B, I mean, just to add to what that story that I was saying about 2003, so in that December night when we were out there for the Cabinet Committee on Security meeting, it was a winter night, and we see this gentleman coming out with a kettle of tea. And that gentleman was actually Mr. George Fernandez, who was then the Defense Minister of the country. So we have reported in such different eras where the defense minister of a country comes out to actually hand out tea to reporters covering a story middle of the night. To that culture of the BJP, you now look at a BJP, but you can't even access the party office anymore, and something that's actually spilling over into the Congress culture, because the new Congress office you can't enter now. It's very difficult to access unless there's a press conference and you've been called in. The 24 Akbar Road, the earlier office, you can still access, but not the new Akbar Bhawan. It's very difficult to access. So we are living in very different times of this relationship between the press and the government. I mean, the simple thing is that you have a prime minister, a democratically elected prime minister, who's not held a single press conference in the past 12 years. And finally, I think, the children who were there on the streets, Dhanya, what makes this protest again different is when the farmers protested against Shambhu border, Singhu border, which I covered consistently, it was a very consolidated, organized group, which was from Haryana and Punjab, a very networked community. The youth who are protesting is not a network community. There are people who don't know each other. They are coming from different parts. I have met several people who have come from Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, just to participate in the protest. 2 doctors who came in all the way from Andaman and Nicobar Islands, because they said that a lot of the government colleges are being turned into deemed universities in Andaman. So that's also another issue that they wanted to protest about. But on the contrary, what you see is actually young people coming in, perhaps from middle income families, upper caste Brahmins, which is the Baniya and the Brahmin constituency of the BJP. I'm sure that for many of these children who are out on the streets, their parents today may have been voting for the BJP or supporters of the BJP. And when their kids are being lathi charged, somewhere things are bound to change, because you are okay as long as action happens against the others, as long as the Muslim houses get bulldozed, as long as the Dalit houses get grazed down. But when the kind of, sort of tyrannical forces come closer to your own families and children, I think that's when you start to see some political and societal shifts, at least in terms of the culture of questioning, which shouldn't be the culture and a responsibility only for the political opposition, but really for society in a democracy.
Okay, I think you need to go, right, Smita?
Yeah, I will be taking your leave now.
Before you leave, a reminder to all our viewers and listeners to go check out Smita's YouTube channel. Smita, you can give the link here.
Yeah, it's just called Smita Sharma Journalist, a very lazy, boring name, but Smita Sharma Journalist on YouTube, Insta. And please, guys, just one request, stop checking out only the reels and the shorts. They don't help in monetization at all. If you need to support my independent work, go and spend some time viewing my original videos on YouTube. Only then I'll get revenue enough to be able to carry on with my journalism. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Smita. So a couple of things I want to just say before we move on to the rest of the discussion. I, as a policy, go and read up all sorts of stuff. Like after I wind up for the day, officially, I then read all
When is that?
No, I mean,
You wind up for the day?
Yeah, I do. And I just go read, I watch what the other side is saying, right? Because we can't live in echo chambers all the time. Therefore, I've been reading up a lot on what the right wing is saying on the protest. It's the same things, which is it's Khalistan funded, it's Pakistan funded, it's China funded, it's Trump funded. There are 4 different funds coming
CIA.
in. Trump funded. There are 4 different funds that are coming in. These are the accusations. And then they are calling everybody who's coming as anti-national. They are picking and choosing some some shots where you can see the violence by the protesters or whoever that is, maybe goons who have come inside, but some sort of violence from the other side, which is not from the police side, and then saying, look at the violence unleashed. I think everybody has very short memory. Now, let's not talk about 1974, 75, what happened during emergency, then Mandal protests, etc. But the recent past, which is 2011, when the India Against Corruption protest happened, even after the Nirbhaya rape, I was in Bangalore when the IAC protests were happening. And this, in the Freedom Park, which is also the place where the CJP protests are happening, it used to be filled. The crowd then was 10 times more than the crowd today. And none of the channels kept asking, who are these people who are coming for the IAC protests? In Delhi, at Ramlila Maidan, thousands and thousands of people used to come every single day when Anna Hazare, Baba Ramdev, etc. were fasting. And none of these channels asked, were all these people who came to, did all these people who come to Ramlila Maidan pay bribes at some point of time in their life? Were they affected by corruption? Is that the only reason why they came? So one question that media is continuously asking is that, who are these protesters? I was watching a television channel yesterday which interviewed 4 people sitting on the ground, and I don't think they were using the logo of the channel because they would have gotten beaten up. So they did not use a logo. They asked this guy, where are you from? He says, I'm from Madhya Pradesh. Till which class have you studied? So he says, no, I studied only 12th standard, but many years ago. So this reporter asked, why have you come? He said, no, I've come to support because I know other people who are studying. Then the anchor asked, why are uneducated people who don't even know the meaning of NEET come? Why are we asking these questions? Because yes, it may have started for NEET, but now we know that people who have any kind of frustration against the government, unemployed people who have been given, shoddy treatment by the government, they are all flowing there, and they will keep doing that. So asking these questions is really stupid. The other thing I want to point out is in 2011, the Congress held a press meet saying that Anna Hazare was being sponsored by American forces, and the Congress said that, why is America so interested in the internal matters of India? Do you know who pushed back at that time? The same media channels. These media channels were shouting that, they're saying, how dare the Congress ask this question of a protest which is organically led by people, by a Gandhian. I specifically remember at the IAC protest, there was a man who had a poster saying Anna Hazare, Arnab Hazare, because it was Times Now that was leading the coverage of this protest 24 hours 24 hours they were covering saying these are organic protests. So the media that during that time which stopped, the government's propaganda. I don't think Congress said that even once after that one time. Today, that same media is spreading all kinds of canards.
So, Tanya, just to add to what you were saying, if you remember how well organized Anna Hazare, the IAC protests were, this is nothing. They just have a tent and one makeshift stage. That was huge. There were water bottles, food being brought in every single day. Tejasvi Surya, the South
Sri Sri
Bengaluru
Ravi
MP.
Shankar in
Exactly.
Bangalore.
Yeah.
It was Sri Sri Ravi Shankar's Art of Living which actually organized a lot of it.
Yeah.
And
there
it
were
was the
German
second
tents.
biggest.
I remember they were changing the red carpet there every few days because it was looking dirty, because we would end up there much before even the people who are sweeping and cleaning would turn up. So now when you think about it, where is the money come? One protester was very right in Delhi. He said, it took me 40 rupees to come from my house in metro to some station.
CIA gave it.
CIA gave those 40 rupees and then I took an auto. 20 rupees was given by Pakistan. This is the only way you can deal with these people, right? Mock them. And today Arnab Goswami is saying, why should the Prime Minister resign? How dare you ask? Then 4 senior ministers went to receive Anna Hazare, Arvind Kejriwal and others to the airport. And then that was not enough. Same Arnab Goswami said, why isn't the Prime Minister there? Today they say, why are you in question?
No, we both were, especially me because I'm older. I have been part of several TV campaigns which went on for days asking ministers to resign. Especially because I was reporting from Tamil Nadu, which was the origin of the 2G scam. I was out there for days where, we would run campaigns saying day 1, why is this person not resigning? Day 2, why is this person not resigning? And this another thing, right? There are exam leaks that happen all over. And after the NEET leak, the government has done what it can. 2 important things to say here. One, after the NEET leak, if you go back and check, in May 2026, the NTA actually first denied the leak. They said no such leak has taken place. It was actually Dharmendra Pradhan who said, yes, there is a problem in the system. Now, leaks have taken over. We actually, in the episode of LME, we've explained about how there have been 89 leaks or something in the past 10 years. Many have happened in the central exams. Some have happened in BJP ruled states. Others have happened in Congress ruled states, in TRS ruled state or whichever. But the point is the lack of accountability, right? The government just doesn't want to reply, doesn't want to even engage with the protesters, which is what is angering people more. And therefore, they are going to then they will be more staunch in their demand, right? Nikita, I want to come to you. When I see the visuals in Delhi, I'm sorry, I was just very angry. But, seeing these visuals watching these shows in the night, actually my BP is going up these days. Maybe not good for my health. But Nikita, what do you think the government's long-term plan is? Just to let this go on, to fizzle out, or that there would be some violence and everything can be branded as anti-national?
Yeah, so I mean, just a couple of points to make. One is that it is true, North India in general has been doing far worse on dissent under the BJP government than I think the southern states have. But it's very important to remember right now, I think, that Shaheen Bagh was a space where we were seeing a lot of criticism against the government. We weren't seeing abusive protests like Smita was not abusive, but we weren't seeing abusing of him in the way that I have been seeing, at least in the last 2 days. But it was a space in which dissent was really mainstream. I was talking yesterday to a friend who isn't a journalist, who doesn't consider themselves politically aware. And they were saying that the first time they really started thinking about what this government is doing to its people is when they realized that it is trying to take away the citizenship of Muslim folks. And that largely happened because of those protests, and they weren't even attending. They saw this online. And that is also the last time we have seen brutal police violence. We have seen mob violence against people in Delhi, aided, abetted, supported by the police. So that memory is still very, very fresh for folks in Delhi who were present there. Same with the farmers' protests. What's happening here, so that's one point. The second is just to quickly advocate for Gen Zs. I do feel like this is a generation of people who grew up into adults during an unprecedented era. They do not know what this country can look like under a non-BJP government. They have no conception of what it might look like when there is not so much fear, when there isn't this kind of hate. It's not like it was a perfect country earlier with, without any inequities, but this is all they know. And that is incredibly scary to me. They've grown up in a pandemic. Most of them have attended college overseas, and they're also dealing with a completely fractured global economy. The kind of unemployment that you're seeing, a lot of people that I spoke to during the protests over the last few days are also people who have done many degrees and are frustrated that they don't have jobs. And so I feel like I also learn a lot from, the boundary setting that they do. When they say we won't work longer than 8 hours, I think we are so used to the idea of treating overwork as some sort of certificate that it's refreshing to see that they're able to do that. And it is also true that they have brought a sense of irreverence to this protest, which is also the fact that on 20th July, despite the fact that it did seem like there was some amount of confusion in the morning, and it is also the best that we could see from what we were reporting, it did seem like much of CJP's leadership was missing from the front lines of the march when the police violence took place. But the people had overtaken this movement by then. And it was really the people who rose up and the people who prevailed against the police violence. So it isn't, and the third thing is, this common criticism of now the opposition has jumped in, the BJP IT cell or a lot of right-leaning folks online are saying Rahul Gandhi got FOMO. That's a common, and because Tanya mentioned FOMO, like that's sort of what they're attributing to this now. But not one, several protesters I met yesterday unprompted. It wasn't even though as I was asking them a question about Rahul Gandhi, it said that, so many mainstream reporters are coming and telling us this is political opportunism. Opposition parties have gotten involved. And they said, if the BJP isn't going to come and talk to us, if the party in power isn't going to come and talk to us, at least someone is, So you have a problem with them coming and standing for us, engaging with us, you do it. And the other thing is that a lot of these young folks that I spoke to told me that they had voted for the BJP. Many people I met said that they were BJP voters. They said कि हम BJP का समर्थन करते थे, which is that we supported the BJP. And one person that I met said, but I have seen what happened in the NEET. My family has lost lakhs of money. My brother is undergoing severe mental health issues. And it is a very simple math that they present you with, which is that my brother or I spent years preparing for this exam. We appeared for it. Maybe we thought we have done well. Maybe we were appearing for the third or fourth time, as was the case with several people I met. And then we realized that the paper has been leaked. And now what do? Either I make up my mind to prepare for this exam again and to appear for it again, and then I don't score as highly. There is an immense amount of frustration. And so this BJP voter then said to me, I now hate Modi. I now hate the BJP. So there is a lot of that, and several BJP voters who are on the streets as well. So I can't say, again, to bring this back, Dhanya, to your question, it's difficult to say. Only the government knows what they're going to do with this. What we can see is that last night I was at the protest till 3 a.m. The numbers are swelling. The sloganeering is now far more targeted against Modi than it was before. On the night of 20th July, once the police violence had happened, one slogan that you were hearing a lot was "Jab jab Modi darta hai, police ko aage karta hai." Every time Modi feels the heat, he puts the police at the front lines. Last night, what I also heard, apart from what Smita was referring to, which is a lot of cussing, sometimes directly against Modi from pockets of protesters, was "Jab jab Modi darta hai, Hindu Muslim karta hai." And so, you're having sort of varied responses to this now. Students who are marginalized caste are telling you that I'm here for NEET. I'm also here because I faced casteism when I was studying. And none of the teachers faced any accountability for this. There are people who are against the increasing and, breakneck speed of privatization of education in India, which we're not even talking about right now. So there are a lot of varied things that have brought people in, and they don't look like Pradhan is going to resign, as you pointed out, but it certainly does not look like the protests are going anywhere anytime soon.
So
The government will have to respond to that.
I think the government did miscalculate this time because farmers' protest or any other protest was limited to one section of the society. And also students behave very differently compared to other people, I feel. There is a sense of solidarity they have, which I think people above the age of 25 find it very hard to relate to, which is why we've seen, for example, NEET students, people thought probably those affected by NEET are the only ones who will come. Those who have given CBSE exams and ended up coming. Those who've just given any exam, they ended up coming. So I think the government did miscalculate. There's another level of politics in this. The government thought that even if this becomes big, it will not become political, quote unquote political, because Rahul Gandhi was doing his own Chatro ki Gunj on the side. And there was some sort of a gap between, like yesterday I was seeing Geetanjali, the wife of Sonam Wangchuk, speak to Rajdeep Sardesai. She said, the Congress should have come here if they were sincere to Jantar Mantar. Why did they go? So somewhere the government was banking on this divide, saying that eventually political parties will not jump in and they cannot leverage this. So it's okay. One section in one corner, we'll manage it. But this is a cumulative effort of multiple forces coming together. Now, it could be political, it could be a pressure group, whatever it is. The fact is that the government cannot ignore this anymore and have a serious problem with people saying, don't politicize this. Why is the opposition jumping? It's their bloody job. That is literally the one job that they have. So
I
they're doing
actually don't
it.
understand. Even the court yesterday said that the Ram Trust, the Ram Temple Trust scam should not be politicized.
Ram Mandir building can be politicized, but when there is a theft there, that shouldn't be politicized.
I really don't understand people who say that. Kavita, I want to come to you. So, you know what Nikita was saying, that this is no longer just about NEET, right? People are coming because they have various grouses. And for a long time, a few people like us have been talking about the centralization of education itself. Like one of the DMK's core demands has been that education should come under the state list. Why is it in the concurrent list? Some of the exams which the BJP has introduced includes the common university entrance test. So a lot of these protesters may not have strong opinions about all that. They may not have opinions about federalism, etc. But I see this as a entry point for people to learn and understand more.
But just that's because federalism is perhaps just too abstract. When it affects your life directly, then people will push back.
Yeah. So Kavita, yeah.
I think this kind of reminds me of the Jallikattu protest. You remember that, Tanya? Like 2017, we had a massive protest on Marina Beach where people, it was very organic protest, but people didn't just come for Jallikattu. They came for various demands. It was one place where they could air all their demands and grievances there. So that it was that kind of protest. So I think, I see the similarities between Jallikattu protest and this protest. And I am not really surprised that this is, I think it's become much bigger than CJP itself. Now across India, it's like, across India, the protest has swelled and it's gone beyond an individual called Sonam Wangchuk or a party called CJP. It's become an all India protest, and there are supporters from all kind of parties. And yesterday at Balanalam, I could see supporters from the DMK had sent its representatives, and Balanalam being CPI headquarters, CPI leaders were like there supporting and volunteering to kind of facilitate the protest. So, all this was happening, and I think it's a very important moment too in the history of at least since 2014, since the BJP took over. I'm sure they have not seen this kind of protest, so they are trying to do everything they could within their power to kind of stop this, but I'm not sure. Also, I think in Tamil Nadu has been protesting against NEET since 2016-17, like after Anita's suicide, and only demand is like scrap NEET entirely, because Tamil Nadu believes that NEET is inherently discriminatory. Like even the government does have free coaching for NEET students, but it's a very good thing, and it has shown some results. There are students who've like fared better after undertaking the government coaching, but I think it's still structurally unequal, and NEET needs to go, because it's there are people who can afford coaching will keep going into private coaching and they could take repeat tests, which the government school students cannot afford to take repeat tests and all. So Tamil Nadu's demand that NEET should go away completely. I think it's much more important demand, and it might take time for that demand to resonate across India, but I think at some point it has to resonate across India because it's a very important demand. It's also about 100 years ago, century ago, you can study medicine only if you knew Sanskrit. I think BJP is trying to push that kind of agenda, like people of certain level or from certain background alone can study medicine is what the BJP ultimately wants to do. This protest is trying to dismantle that idea. In that sense, it's a very important protest, but I really want to see this protest go beyond irregularities in the NEET and to demand the entire scrapping of NEET as an exam, as an eligibility exam.
Can I add to what Kavita was saying about NEET, about the editorial that's gone in MK Stalin's name? Dhanya was talking about this before the show and I was reading through it. And this is something I want to draw people's attention to. Medical education demands perseverance, empathy, discipline, and long-term academic excellence. These qualities cannot be captured adequately in a single examination conducted in one day. I think that, in a sense, talks about why this centralization of our education system, exams like NEET, need to go. It cannot be a cosmetic thing of just asking for Pradhan's resignation. That is it is something that is the bare minimum at this point. But we need to look at this entire system more deeply at a time when we're hearing that they plan to come up with another agency that will be more centralization. All the exams will now be conducted by that one agency.
No, I think it's very important to push the conversation of why NEET itself is an unnecessary exam, just like the governor is an unnecessary post, right? This is the right time to ask these questions again. Nikita, you were talking about Shaheen Bagh and the farmers' protest. I think one advantage the BJP has had, and I'm not saying just the BJP, even the Congress before this, is that most of those protests were identity-based. So they could go behind the farmers saying it's Khalistani. They could go behind the Muslims at Shaheen Bagh with 100 different excuses. But here it's sort of identity-less. People are seamlessly coming from all across and they are not very sure what will work, right? We have seen over the last few days, in fact, as I said, I have been watching channels. A large part of their coverage is now about how their reporters are getting attacked on the ground. I have my strong opinions about this, but Nikita, will start with you.
I think the government did find it easier maybe to villainize those protests. And perhaps you're also seeing folks who are typically from their constituencies come here. But eventually, this is a protest that has also strengthened. And I think Revati Lal has made this point in her piece for The Wire. Other folks are beginning to say it too. Left student organizations are really who propelled and helped, this movement thrive. So it was the ISA, it was the SFI who put their cadres here, along with other organizations who really helped it grow in its initial weeks and days. On the media, so I have been thinking about another protest, or last night I was thinking about another protest, which is the protest of a lot of young Muslim women in Karnataka, in Udupi, against the hijab ban that was imposed on educational institutions there in 2022. And I was there for 2 or 3 months during that time. And a lot of reporters from regional channels as well as mainstream channels who were in Karnataka at that time and, who were in Udupi at that time and what their behavior was. And you would see these women come out for press conferences and they were minors. They were 16-year-old women. When you would speak to them privately, extremely irreverent, very, very sharp, smart, clear on why they were pushing back against the ban. And when they would come to press club, they would get mobbed. They would be asked questions such as, has the ISI funded you? Have you been funded by terrorists in Pakistan and Iran, whatever? They would be physically mobbed by people who identified themselves as reporters from English language channels and Kannada channels. And I'm bringing this up because it was a very visceral image for me. It was 5 16-year-old women who had to run to their cars every time they conducted a press conference so that they could avoid all of these male reporters haranguing them, taking up their space. And this is what we have seen a lot of journalists do time and again against people that are considered dissident by this government. We have seen, and the the common argument goes that, they often are in the dock for what their anchors do, which is perhaps true. But two things. One is that the reporters are not always completely not culpable either. Eventually, what is being shown on the panel discussion is coming from what is being reported in a certain way on the ground. You might have the one odd reporter who is not doing it, but in most cases that I have seen, the reporter is the is the person who's bringing the fodder into the machine. They are not apart from the machine. They are a cog in the machine, and they are feeding material into that machine that is then being used to villainize people. We now have short public memories, perhaps, but these channels gave us urban accents. They resulted in the very, very targeted demonization of the folks who were then arrested in the case that we now know as the Bhima Koregaon set of cases, where activists were accused of a plot to assassinate Modi. Who was giving us these claims and giving credence to these claims? It wasn't just anchors, it was also reporters. The second thing is, and again, this is not to say that reporters should be mobbed. The thing is that there is a lot of anger against these channels for the things that they have done for the last 10 years. Whether or not we agree on the method in which this anger may be expressed, what is difficult to deny is that anger will not always be expressed in ways that everybody finds palatable or agrees with.
I know that we are supposed to condemn violence, and I do. But I also condemn violence against people in Shaheen Bagh, in Kashmir, in all of these protests, during CAA protests, every time there is a protest anywhere in the country. These are the same reporters. And I refuse to agree that they are just doing their job. They are not innocent bystanders in what's happening. They're active, willing participants in demonizing large sections of the society. They know exactly what they are doing. I have been part of newsrooms where reporters come to the newsroom, sometimes give certain details, some other times make up, fabricate details from what they've seen on the ground for these anchors, for these editors to then further embellish that and present it to the country as journalism. If you say that they're just doing their job, I want to know what it is that their job is. If their job is journalism, they are not doing it. They haven't been doing it for a long, long time. If they can endanger lives of millions of people in the country, what makes them so special that they should be accorded protection and safety that others are not? I don't understand this special privilege that journalists think they have. And I say this as a person who's been beaten up more number of times than I can count in protests, by police, by protesters, what have you. So I'm not just sitting here and putting lives of other journalists at risk. And I did see that there were protesters who were carefully monitoring what the reporters are saying before heckling them. A lot of times they're just heckled. They're not really beaten up or roughed up. I find it very difficult to sympathize when you are active participants in demonizing, vilifying, endangering safety of people, and then you say, oh, but somebody heckled me, somebody threw water at me, my God, cry me a river. I have no sympathies. Yes, there might be some cases where reporters were genuinely heckled or they were roughed up. I feel sorry for it, but I think that's an occupational hazard if you're working in any of these channels, as it was for me.
Okay, I have a slightly different take, but mostly, yes, I agree with what Nikita and Pooja have said. See, most channels have been agent provocators for years, not just yesterday or today. They have been doing this for a very long time. And for a long time, the same people cheered them on. Now, let's also not forget that those people who are heckling or assaulting these journalists, calling them as Godi media, were their consumers. They were also sharing this, but today they've realized that when I'm on the other side, these guys are not supporting me, right? Now we should primarily place the blame on the editors, the anchors, the executives who decide the editorial line. I have absolutely no doubts about it. The frontline reporters, as everybody has said here, are, yes, the people who feed this information. But I think the bigger responsibility is on the people who decide these lines and not frontline reporters. And to be fair to frontline reporters, there are many times I've seen that they do the proper reporting, but then the lines are also twisted. I'm not saying everybody is the same, right? But the distinction we have to make is that when a large crowd like this is very angry, we can't go and tell them that, look, boss, don't be angry at all journalists. Some journalists are good, some journalists are bad. Some journalists in bad organizations are good. So you're essentially telling the mob, you differentiate good and bad, you differentiate the good in the bad, and then you beat up only the bad in the bad. That is not going to happen, right? Anger is going to be against everybody. You cannot be dictating the crowd as to how to behave. And I think this is a very important thing to note, that, you know, when people go back home in the evening and watch these news channels, they are again seeing their protests being villainized. Like, you put any bloody Hindi or English news channel, you are continuously seeing people saying, ye Pakistani agent hai, ya Khalistani hai. Tomorrow they're going back to the protest and like, chalo, these guys have come, let's whack them, right? So where is the responsibility of these editors to at least ask questions on behalf of the people? They are not doing that. And it is not the crowd that is endangering the reporters. It is the editors who are putting their reporters in danger willfully and then making TRP or BARC ratings out of that, saying that, oh, look, my reporter has been attacked. And they're all sitting and discussing this. So to the audience, you must keep on asking the editorial line. You must keep on questioning, or like I do, stop watching.
I agree wholeheartedly with except one point. I don't think the onus is more on the editor or the anchor to speak for the people, because they are cut off from people. They're sitting in their offices. Their entire world, because they do 12, 14, 15 hour shifts, their entire world is that cesspool that is their newsroom. The reporter goes out on the field. The reporter speaks to people. The reporter is supposed to be the voice of the people, report what you've seen. So I think the onus is more, the responsibility is more on the reporter to report what they've seen.
No,
Number
no,
one.
I have a difference here. One, Nikita also wants to say something. See, one is the reporter can report what they see. You never know how the channel is going to twist it, right? We both have had experience about how the channel will twist. I don't think it's on the reporter alone. But my problem is that now that this is happening, now you forget everything else. You forget all that has happened. Every organization of this scale has around 200 journalists. There's one newspaper which did not even cover the protest properly on the first day. That newspaper will have 1,000 journalists. I'm saying, even if you're junior, the junior most in office, now is the time to organize within your organization and tell them this is not done. We are just earning people's anger. I think that is where these journalists must come together, but they're not. All the journalists who have even gotten beaten up are all saying, oh my God, the crowd did this to me. But turn around, man, and ask.
Just very quickly, one common argument that we hear is that the reporters don't have any choice. It's a shrinking media ecosystem. Everybody is trying to do the best that they can. This is a very common defense that you hear. And the thing is that we are all making choices. When you left a TV newsroom, you made a choice. I was briefly with the TV newsroom. I realized that this is not for me. I made a choice. A lot of journalists today have made those choices and have had to make them under very difficult circumstances. So it feels like quite a disservice then to those journalists to say that these journalists don't have a choice, because they do. And as Pooja was mentioning, even when I was at the protest last night or the day before, you can see a certain way in which the questions are asked. You can see a certain way in which their responses are then twisted in the next question that the reporter asks. So, for instance, yesterday I saw one reporter tell them, but you want this country to then suffer like Nepal did. And in this case, the protester kept saying again and again that the point here is that we need the education system to change. Okay, but don't you think then that you're making it so difficult for the government? So you're asking questions in a way that even the person on the other end realizes what you're going to do with their responses. And now you are in this extremely charged atmosphere. And last night was very charged. It was swelling till 2-3 a.m. I saw huge queues sneaking into the protest site. The police violence has elevated and given momentum to this protest in a way that I don't think was what anyone would have predicted a week ago. So you are in this charged atmosphere. The person on the other side is not an idiot. When they hear you frame your questions a certain way, they realize what you're doing. And then you're in the middle of this sort of electric setting. Protesters are not perfect people. And the expectation that anger will always come out in a way that feels polite it's simply not going to happen. So I also feel like this point that she was making of provocation, etc., you can see on the ground sometimes with the questions that reported. And this is, again, Not to say that we think violence against reporters is okay, but to say that the medium of this violence has to be far more complicated than this is an angry mob villainizing hapless reporters.
Kavita, so, in the states that we cover too, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, etc., much of the media is again owned by political parties or they're owned by corporate. But we don't hear this kind of, allegation against even the worst channels that they're anti-people all the time. Now, they're anti-people sometime, they can be, right-wing sometime, but they're always not behaving like this. And this Muslim-Hindu game, most of the channels don't keep playing, right?
See, in Tamil Nadu, I just wanted to start with an example. You remember how Tamil YouTube channels and even the mainstream channels cover all the funerals of celebrities when they die. No, it's like a total scene. When Bharat Raja passed away, when Bhagya Raj passed away, the way even the mainstream channels and the YouTube channels covered the deaths was like horrible. And I remember there's this director called Tyagarajan Kumar Raja who almost shooed away the media. He basically asked, "Are you not ashamed doing this?" I know him, so I asked him, I tried to tell him, this is not the fault of the reporters, and management forces them to do these things. He said, "Yeah, I understand, but there is something the journalists also need to realize. One, they are putting their own dignity in line. They are like compromising their dignity when they do these things. And two, they owe something to their career. You're a journalist, you are not there because I completely understand if they are there because they respect Bharat Raja. People covering the protest, they are covering the protest because they like the idea of dissent that is brewing there. No, that's not. They really wanted to create problems there. As journalists, they are looking to increase their TRPs. They are looking to increase the viewership, and that's why they are using the protest. So it has its counter effect, I think. And what are we talking about? We are talking about assault on media persons. I completely agree that violence needs to be condemned, but lives are at stake. People have died because of need, and people are protesting out there to stop more deaths from happening. And what are we discussing when we talk about violence inflicted on journalists? I totally agree with it.
Sorry, just also quickly to say that a lot of times this violence, I can remember instances during the anti-CA NRC protests when I had tweeted something and Mohandas Pai retweeted it with a very sort of strong, rebuttal as is his want, and really sort of going at me and unleashed an army of trolls for days after, one of whom doxed me. So are we only going to then talk about a certain kind of violence that is packaged for television in a certain way, or are we also going to talk about the violence that we are subjected to by not just a protester who's a part of a large gathering, but in this case, an industrialist sitting behind a computer and thinking that it's fine to come at me for my political opinion?
Exactly. Yeah. Like Pooja mentioned earlier, there are people who are abusing us online every day, almost every day. And is that not some form of violence? Which management, which editor has taken responsibility and said, okay, stop this? They've even taken, which editor in the mainstream media has taken an effort to talk to, parties who are setting these trolls off on journalists? Has anything happened? Has any dialogue happened about this? And why is this selective outrage against people who are actually protesting and dissenting?
My last point was that are these journalists standing with their colleagues when, for instance, my former colleagues at the Caravan were assaulted when they were covering the communal violence that the Delhi police and BJP politicians helped unleash on mobs, and 3 of my colleagues were assaulted. I'm sure you have had instances in which you have seen your colleagues in the News Minute and get assaulted. Are these journalists and people, I'm happy to say that we condemn any forms of violence, but I do want to just leave all of them with this question, that when they were coming after us and when they were coming after our peers, and when we were saying that we are being attacked physically online, when cases are being filed by this government that are clearly maliciously intended against journalists that result in imprisonment, that result in a chilling effect, is that not violence? And are these journalists then standing with the peers who are saying that they are facing this violence at that time?
No, this is a question I was asking Pooja yesterday, that how many times, I mean, once a week as DGPUB chairperson, I write a condemnation letter for some arrest or some case, and nobody stands up for
Yeah.
that, right? Nobody does. None of these people do. In fact, they will be the first ones doing live that day saying, oh, there's an anti-national journalist, let there be a case against him.
Yeah, I can go on and on, but I'm going to just say this and leave it at that because we are time bound. But those who are professional hecklers. Recent example is when Naseeruddin Shah was in Hyderabad. He was coming out of the airport and there was a reporter from Times Now who went and heckled. He wasn't asking questions. It was the lowest IQ kind of thing. Why are you angry, sir? Why are you angry? Till he gets angry, you will shove a mic in his face, keep asking that, and then say, oh, but my God, he's yelling back at our reporter. These reporters go and become celebrities in their newsrooms. UR Anantmurthy was on dialysis. He was in great pain in the last few days, and reporters hounded him till he was frustrated, and then they screamed at him, at the reporters. And Girish Karnad was on oxygen supply, they hounded him. Why do these professional hecklers have a problem when they are heckled, when water is thrown at them? I have zero sympathy.
Oof. Now, after this show comes, let's see the reactions. Well, okay, we'll move to the recommendations. Pooja, what is yours?
I was speaking of Naseeruddin Shah this morning. I watched his interview with Karan Thapar. He was really moved. He was very emotional, but I think we should all watch that if we're still not moved by what's happening in the country.
Kavita?
I've just started reading Romila Thapar's memoir, Just Being, and I think it's at least for me personally, the idea of India, understanding India was through Romila Thapar. So for a historian, of one of the most influential historians, so to read her memoir is deeply moving, and I hope to finish it as soon as possible, and I strongly recommend it.
I would recommend a piece written by a young reporter for Queerbeat, a queer rights news publication I work with. And this reporter has written about the incursions of Hindu nationalism into the queer movement in India. The ways in which the fact that a lot of the movement's leaders seem to not want to talk about questions of caste, class, differences is affecting the movement's vision. Very, very strong piece looking specifically at Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi, as a trans rights activist. And on just the protests, since these are happening, I would recommend reading the Revati Lal piece that I was referring to earlier, which talks about how the building of this movement has happened not only by the CJP, but also by ISA, SFI, and so on, and Ambedkarite organization, which I think is a very important expansion of our understanding of how this movement grew.
Yeah, I wanted to actually recommend Revati, but I would then recommend Arundhati Roy's article on The Wire, where I like one paragraph especially where she says that my skepticism of the CJP went, why? Go read the article. The second I want to recommend, I don't know if you can watch it in India. We did organize a screening of it for News Minute subscribers. It's while we watched the movie by Vinay Shukla on Ravish Kumar. Now, why I'm recommending that watch now is that there is this conversation in that movie between Saurabh Shukla, who is now the founder of Red Mic. Saurabh used to be a very prominent reporter of NDTV Hindi. So NDTV is going to shut down. NDTV is going to be taken over by Adani. So there's this conversation between Ravish and Saurabh about...
Is that a Freudian slip where you said NDTV is going to be shut down?
No. I mean, this was at a time when NDTV was going to be bought by Adani. And Saurabh is like, I have gotten offers from other channels. But, I don't think that's the job I want to do because of what they do. And then he later decides to start his own organization. I think that is what we're talking about choices that ordinary journalists have been making for a very long time at huge risks. And let's be thankful to those people.
I want to end with asking our viewers to look at something. I mean, we've worked in all different kinds of newsrooms, all of us, but we now have a safe space. Tanya, you can get embarrassed, but here's a safe space where we're allowed to do journalism and not be hecklers, not actually just go and create drama and make ourselves the story. So if you like this kind of journalism, do support us by becoming subscribers of the News Minute and News Laundry. That's a very impromptu CTA that we didn't see coming.
Yeah. And do read our story on ONGC. We've got a lot of love for it from the right wing. Nikita was the the editor, is an investigation where we looked at how ONGC, one of India's biggest oil PSUs, gave around 670 crores to NGOs and organizations linked with the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. The RSS is not registered, but everybody around the RSS who are registered entities are flush with money. And this is just the first glimpse, our first investigation. Do read that. Thank you very much, Nikita and Kavita. And we will keep covering the protests. Do also
Thank
watch
you.
News Laundry.